Hello and welcome to another episode of Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic book collection all over again. I've got our book of the day right here. And as we open it up, I want to talk a little bit about the supernatural. Not the show with the Sam and Dean, although I do have a lot I could say about that show. But supernatural elements in real life. Do you believe in them? Do you believe that people have psychic powers or that there are ghosts and things like that? I'm skeptical. I'm not somebody who believes in a lot of X-Files stuff existing in real life, but sometimes you have experiences that you can't quite explain another way. So I have had some psychic dreams where the thing that I've dreamt about has actually happened in a very specific way, like not like, oh, I thought I would see somebody on the bus the next day and then I did, and like that was pretty probable to begin with. But in one case I had a dream that one of my friends would dye their hair blue, which I'd never heard that she would be doing, and then the next day her hair was blue, and I was like, and she's like, oh, I just decided to do this yesterday, and I was like, how could I have possibly known that in my dream? And you start to wonder, like, were there enough unconscious cues in the world that my brain received that allowed me to have that dream, or am I just psychic? And then I also really think I saw a ghost one time. It was in a cemetery too, but it wasn't like a woo kind of ghost. It was this grandfather and this little kid who I spent some time talking to, and then I turned around after I was done talking to them, and they weren't there anymore. And maybe they just like walked away, but it was a pretty plain, wide, open cemetery, and they were just gone. So I think they were ghosts. So I do believe that sometimes some inexplicable things happen that probably has a lot to do with coincidence more than it has to do with anything, you know, truly supernatural, but who knows? Ooh, oh wow, okay. Okay, I have plucked out here Infinity, an Infinity Companion, the first big event from Marvel Now, written by Jonathan Hickman. Wow, I have a lot to say about this. So this actually might wind up being like the newest oversized book that we're going to open, because I think all of the rest of my Marvel Now era oversized books are just in a box with Marvel Now stuff. I briefly tried to sell like my complete Marvel Now collection before we moved to New Zealand. So I'm like, do I really want to read all these in physical format again when I could read them on Marvel Unlimited? So I was like, hey, it's 8 short boxes, it's like thousands of dollars. Nobody took me up on it. So now they're here. Maybe somebody in New Zealand wants the complete Marvel Now. But let's see, what can I say about Infinity? So Infinity was like the first big hurrah of Hickman's run on Avengers, which is something that's kind of hard to explain in total, that I would probably need to refer to some notes to recap for you effectively. But the thing that you need to know is Captain America and Iron Man decide that they need to construct a larger version of the Avengers to tackle larger problems. They're playing a much bigger ball game than they were in the Brian Bendis years, and this is sort of kind of indicated by the last thing that happens to them before Avengers versus X-Men, which is Thanos kind of returning to menace the Earth after all of his Abnett and Lanning cosmic stuff, and then also by Avengers versus X-Men itself, right? So Hickman does a really smart thing and says, well, what would motivate the Avengers now in this period? It would be the motivation that they've got to tackle bigger, more difficult problems. So this team gets put together, and they are definitely dealing with a lot of problems on Earth, but there's also this weirdness happening with this other planet that's got weird life forms on it, and I forget if we've gotten up to incursions yet in New Avengers at this point. Maybe we have. And then into this is thrust Thanos with these 5 really deadly generals of his, who is like, we are finally taking the fight to Earth in a way that's going to let me conquer them. And potentially take their Infinity Stones, maybe. And also then there's this idea of the Builders, who are this totally other group in space that is also facing off. I probably can't go a lot deeper than that because it has been a while since I read this. I remember getting this and sitting like down in my easy chair, which I had to leave in the States, and just, oh, what a great page I opened to. Lionel Yu. Doing some Captain Marvel in peril right here. And I remember just reading this and just being enthralled. Hickman does this great thing on his collections where there's no like chapter breaks for the issues themselves, like there's no covers inserted. He just puts in little chapter breaks that have page titles on them, like this one, Sent and Received. Might not be able to see it because it's on white. And that is the way that he he breaks up the book, and it's really quite cool because you just feel like you're reading this one long, hundreds and hundreds of page long book instead of a lot of comic issues that have been collected. And Hickman is an impeccable planner, so it actually really does feel like one big story. And this is not just Infinity 1 through 6. It includes New Avengers 7 through 12, Avengers 14 through 23, and then also a 2-issue Infinite comic. Here's the thing. There's always a here's the thing, right? First of all, this is in the Hickman omnibus of this period. So do you have any reason to buy this event book anymore? Not really. Because even if you're going for an oversized shelf of Hickman, you probably want the omnibus. And if you were getting the individual OHCs, you might want this, but it also duplicates a lot of content from them. So it's kind of like a weird catch-22. Then the other question is, well, would you just want to buy this to read it? And the thing is that Hickman's plot gets so far afield in the rest of Avengers and New Avengers that I find it really hard to just appreciate the story for what it was. It's such a small anchor point in what turns out to be a much broader tale, and I don't know that it was like so satisfying on its own that it merits a reread on its own. The thing that really happens from it that's interesting is that what Black Bolt does at the end, which is kind of explode the Terrigen of stores in his floating version of the city of New Attilan, which creates the Terrigen clouds around the world, which creates all of these new Inhumans, including Miss Marvel, but also all of the Inhumans that turn up in Inhuman. So it's definitely a significant point. And if you're into the Inhumans plot of that Charles Soule had been writing and has just recently wrapped up of Marvel, this really is the start point, and I could see wanting to get this if you're trying to have an oversized Inhumans shelf. It would start with this, it would also have the Inhumanity oversized hardcover, and then it would proceed to the oversized hardcovers of the Soule stuff. But pretty strong art throughout. They use a number of different artists, but they're all kind of within the same level of quality, and the colors are relatively consistent so that you can really enjoy it. One of those artists is Jerome Opina, who is one of my favorite artists that works for Marvel. Now, along with this is the Infinity Companion. This is something that Marvel started doing in the Now era that they had kind of done previously with House of M and Civil War, but then hadn't really done for Secret Invasion or Siege. But had done for Avengers vs. X-Men, which is take all of the things that got paired up with the crossover that were not direct parts of it and put it in a single oversized hardcover so you could have bookshelf unity and you didn't have to chase down all of the tie-ins of the event. But the thing is, depending on the event, sometimes the tie-ins can be very, very tertiary to the main event. They don't really feel like they connect to it. You're not getting an important story from it. It kind of is just like somewhere off to the side. I would say that this one, let's see, it's mostly off to the side, but the couple of things that really connect really are good connections. And I would say the main reason I bought it is because as a crossover from Captain Marvel 15 and 16 and Avengers Assemble 18, 19, and 20 that at the time was not collected anywhere else. I think since then it's been put into the Captain Marvel Complete series, trade paperbacks. But at the time, this was the only way to get it, and it really is very much a missing chapter of Infinity. It's one of the big space battles that happens, and it dives way, way deeper into what's happening in that battle with Captain Marvel, which we just get a brief glimpse of in the story. So to me, for those 5 issues, I really wanted the companion, although this was $99. So even though I'm sure I got it for $50, that's a big price to pay for 5 issues. It has some other stuff in it, and the way that I justified it to myself is it has these 2 miniseries, Infinity the Hunt and Infinity Heist, which were not available originally in trade paperback, or maybe they were, but it like came out after this. So I thought, let me just get them in this, and that way I'll have them all in one place. Those 2 series were pretty bad. I eventually did read them, not in this because this is sealed. I think I like read them on Marvel Unlimited like while I was on a train or something, and they're just not great. So the other stuff in here, it has some interesting samples of the time, and that's what these companions kind of turn into, like kind of just a sampler platter of what was going on at the time. So this has some Thunderbolts, that was okay. The particular story I didn't really love so much. It has the beginning of Mighty Avengers, which is quite good, but it had Greg Land on art, which some people really don't like. 2 issues of Nova, which was a great title at that point, but I don't know how enjoyable these are divorced from the rest of it. A couple of issues of Superior Spider-Man Team Up, 1 issue of Fearless Defenders, 2 issues of Secret Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy 8 and 9, and Wolverine and the X-Men Annual 1, which is probably one of the few that really felt like it was a part of the Infinity narrative. A lot of the other stuff was way off to the side, especially Mighty Avengers. Like, it's kind of embarrassing that they even branded it as Infinity, because I've read it several times and it only very, 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 very vaguely has anything to do with Infinity. So I don't know that I can really recommend either of these books, because I think if you want all of the Hickman story, you probably want the new Hickman Omnibus that's coming out, or actually came out, and then we're getting volume 2 this year. And if you want it for the stuff at the time, I think you could just be sampling on Marvel Unlimited rather than paying all this money for a book. So the only reason I really think you want Infinity is probably for if you're trying to build a complete oversized Inhumans run, because I think this kind of acts as the zero hardcover to that run. So now we are going to have the ceremonial shelving of Infinity and Infinity Companion. I don't really know where they're supposed to go yet. Put them over here, off camera. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Crushing Comics, helping me fall in love with my comic collection all over again. And as I said, that's probably the newest thing that we're ever going to open before we are done this job. Please keep tuning in. There are definitely a lot more books to open, and I would like to open them here with you. Thank you so much for watching.